Richard II is a play by Shakespeare which is based on the King of England who ruled from 1377 to 1399. In this play, Shakespeare tells the story of the historical Richard II, as well as exploring themes such as the divine right of kings, meritocracy versus birthright, among others. The specific details surrounding the usurpation of the real Richard is unknown. It is not clear whether or not Shakespeare is correct when it comes to these details, but for the average viewer, this is not important. What is true of both Richards, however, is that they imposed high taxes on the people of England, and that can be enough to overthrow a ruler both then and now. In Shakespeare's play, Richard is seen as a spoiled and entitled king who is sensitive to criticism and who does not care much about anyone other than himself. He was crowned king at an early age, and he wants all the spoils and glamour that comes with kingship without necessarily working for it. The idea of the divine right of kings is exaggerated in this play. Richard is pointed out by God as the rightful ruler. Therefore, no one should question any of his actions. Everything he does is right. Don't you dare to question it. In the beginning of the play, Bolingbroke, who is Richard's cousin, and Mowbray is summoned to Richard's court. Both are accused of murder. However, none of them admits any guilt. They just blame each other. Richard can't make up his mind, so he decides that they have to battle it out. Whoever wins the battle is free of guilt. The other one will pay for his life in the battle. When the day of judgment has come and the two cavalrymen are about to battle, Richard suddenly changes his mind. He decides to instead banish them both from England. This decision will ultimately decide Richard's own fate in the play. Despite all the weaknesses, his soft-hearted forgiveness turns out to be his most fatal one. To afford his war against Ireland, Richard needs to borrow money from the aristocrats. To pay them back, Richard promises to give them a share of taxes that he will impose on the commoners in the future. This is how Bolingbroke can get people on his side in the first place while in exile. Richard has completely lost favour with his people, both among the aristocrats and the general public. His personality is also the extreme opposite of his cousin. While Bolingbroke is a natural leader and someone who gets along with other people, Richard always creates a barrier between himself and other people, relishing in his God-given power and the spoils and riches that kingship has granted him. His friends Bushy, Bagot, and Green only has the function of flattering the king, always praising him, never offering any criticism. In his banishment, Bolingbroke plots to overthrow Richard and to take over the throne himself after he learns that Richard has seized the land of his father and taken it for himself. This is a familiar pattern we see in Richard, which is why his uncle pointed out that the land of England was leased out like a farm, with Richard as its landlord. When Richard hears news of Bolingbroke's treachery, he cannot believe that anyone would dare to go against him. For so long he had thought of himself as untouchable and liked by everyone. Now suddenly his own cousin is planning to take the crown by force, and many of Bolingbroke's followers are Richard's former friends and allies. Dear earth, I do salute thee with my hand, though rebels wound thee with their horses' hoofs, as a long-parted mother with her child plays fondly with her tears and smiles in meeting. So, weeping, smiling, greet I thee, my earth, and do thee favours with my royal hands. Feed not thy sovereign's foe, my gentle earth, nor with thy sweets comfort his ravenous sense, but let thy spiders that suck up thy venom and heavy-gated toads lie in their way, doing annoyance to the treacherous feet which with usurping steps do trample thee. Shortly after, we see for the first time a Richard with low self-esteem, as he plunges into despair because he has been left by so many of his friends. He has finally come back to earth from his high seat. Now he claims that he's not really so unlike common people after all. Throw away respect, tradition, form, and ceremonious duty, for you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread like you, feel want, taste grief, need friends. Subjected thus, How can you say to me, I am a king?" But Richard gets back up on his feet and regains self-confidence. He will not give up the fight so easily. Richard is still the rightful king of England, and now it's time to fight back. "No hand of blood and bone can gripe the sacred handle of our sceptre, unless he do profane, steal, or usurp." Richard remains stubborn, even though it becomes clear that Bolingbroke has the upper hand. He hides away in his castle in Wales, while Bolingbroke is marching towards him with his army. The Duke of York, who has now sided with Bolingbroke, suddenly becomes anxious that maybe the usurpation will lead to divine retribution by God. Bolingbroke shrugs it off, even though he himself thinks it can be a possibility. That is why he tries to not be too forceful when he finally meets Richard. The two manage to settle it with words instead of blood, as they both see where things are heading, and Bolingbroke wants Richard to admit that he's the one at fault. He needs to give away the crown willingly. Then Bolingbroke will feel like a rightful king who accepts it as a gift. "Here, cousin, seize the crown. On this side my hand, on that side thine. Now is this golden crown like a deep well that owes two buckets, filling one another, the emptier ever dancing in the air, the other down, unseen, and full of water. That bucket down and full of tears am I, drinking my griefs, whilst you mount up on high." Bolingbroke has now successfully taken the crown from England and broken the line of Plantagenet kings. Richard was an authentic heir to the throne, but now it was seized. The warnings we could see in this play that "the blood of English shall manure the ground" will later turn out to be true, as we see in the later plays of the tetralogy. Shakespeare here presents the divine right of kings as something sacred, a bond to God which is not supposed to be broken, no matter how flawed the ruler is. The full sanctity of medieval kingship, which Richard had inherited, could never be recovered by Bolingbroke and his sons. The theme of meritocracy is also apparent in the play. Bolingbroke gains the crown by being smart, skilled, and working towards a goal, which is a very modern way of thinking about how people should get to power. Richard, on the other hand, is useless, takes his power for granted, is too sensitive to criticism, and does not have the character traits which we like to see in a king. But he was the rightful heir to the throne.